A billionaire CEO collapses on a rain-soaked Manhattan sidewalk, knocked down by a homeless teenager running from security guards. For just a moment, their eyes meet. Piercing blue against piercing blue. The boy's defiant expression triggers something deep in the old man's memory, a ghost of someone he lost 15 years ago. But he dismisses it. After all, his daughter was white. This boy has brown skin. What Marcus Wellington doesn't know is that the stranger who just disappeared into the night is the grandson he never knew existed. And weeks from now, fate will bring them crashing together again in a way that will shatter everything he thought he knew about family, redemption, and the devastating cost of prejudice. What happens next is absolutely unbelievable. The November rain had turned Manhattan's streets into rivers of neon reflections. But 16-year-old Elijah Carter barely noticed. He'd learned to move like a shadow through the city. Invisible, forgettable, safe. His worn sneakers, held together with duct tape, splashed through puddles as he ducked into the alley behind Giovanni's Italian restaurant on Fifth Avenue. "Right on time, kid," Marco, the night manager, said with a tired smile, handing him a white plastic bag. "Chicken parmesan tonight. Still warm." "Thanks, Marco." Elijah's voice was soft, almost musical. His mother's voice, though he didn't know anyone who would remember that anymore. "You staying warm enough?" Marco asked, concern creasing his weathered face. Elijah nodded, clutching the bag close. "I'm good." "Really?" But he wasn't good. Nothing had been good since the night 2 years ago when he'd woken in his foster home to police lights and social workers telling him there'd been an incident at the group home he'd just left. A fire. 3 kids dead. And suddenly, the system that had already failed him decided he was too much trouble, too traumatized, too broken to place. So he ran. Now, the doorway of an abandoned building on 42nd Street was home. A sleeping bag stolen from a donation bin was his bed, and the worn leather wallet in his pocket, empty except for his parents' faded wedding photo and his mother's old driver's license, was all he had left of the family that once loved him. Elijah had his mother's striking blue eyes, the kind that seemed to glow even in darkness. He had her sharp cheekbones and graceful hands. But he had his father's rich brown skin, his broad shoulders, his quiet strength. He was a beautiful contradiction, a living testament to a love that had conquered prejudice. If only he knew the story behind those eyes. As he settled into his doorway that evening, rain hammering the cardboard he'd propped up for shelter, Elijah pulled out the one treasure he'd managed to keep through 2 years on the streets, a battered copy of Great Expectations his mother had given him for his 13th birthday. The pages were dog-eared and water-stained, but the words still worked their magic, transporting him away from the cold, the hunger, the bone-deep loneliness. He was so absorbed in reading by the dim light of a nearby street lamp that he didn't notice the security guard approaching until a heavy hand clamped down on his shoulder. "You can't sleep here, kid. Move along." "I'm not sleeping, I'm reading," Elijah said, his mother's defiant chin tilt appearing automatically. "Don't get smart with me. This is private property. You've got 30 seconds to clear out or I'm calling the cops." Elijah's heart hammered. He'd been arrested twice before for loitering. Another offense and they'd try to put him back in the system. Or worse, juvenile detention. He grabbed his backpack and ran, the security guard's shouts echoing behind him. He rounded the corner at full speed, rain blinding him, and collided with something solid. Not something, someone. They both went down hard on the slick pavement. "What the?" The man's voice was cultured, angry. Elijah looked up into a face he'd seen before, on billboards, in newspaper boxes, on the sides of buildings. Marcus Wellington, real estate mogul, one of the richest men in New York. And he was staring at Elijah with the strangest expression. Their eyes locked. Blue on blue. For 3 heartbeats, neither moved. Marcus saw something in that face, that defiant tilt of the chin, those impossibly familiar eyes. For a moment, Emily stared back at him from 15 years in the past, young and furious and heartbroken. But that was impossible. Emily was gone. And this boy. The security guard's voice shattered the moment. "Sorry, Mr. Wellington. This homeless kid's been causing trouble." Elijah didn't wait to hear more. He scrambled to his feet and ran, disappearing into the maze of Manhattan streets, leaving Marcus Wellington sitting in the rain, haunted by a pair of blue eyes he couldn't forget. Before we continue with this incredible journey, I spent countless hours researching and crafting this story to bring you something truly meaningful. If stories like this touch your heart and you want to see more acts of kindness that restore faith in humanity, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. It means the world to me and helps these important stories reach others who need to hear them. Now, let's see what happens next. Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that completely changed your perspective? Share your story in the comments below. Marcus Wellington couldn't sleep. 3 weeks had passed since the collision on the rain-soaked street, but those blue eyes haunted him. He'd catch himself staring at old photographs of Emily, searching for answers to questions he couldn't quite form. His therapist called it unresolved grief. His business partners called it burnout. But Marcus knew it was something else. Guilt that had festered for 15 years, now cracked open by a stranger's gaze. On a crisp December morning, Marcus broke his routine. Instead of having his driver take him directly to the office, he told Charles to drop him at Washington Square Park. He needed to walk, to think, to breathe air that didn't smell like boardrooms and expensive cologne. The park was alive with the chaos of city life. Students rushing to NYU classes, street performers setting up, pigeons swarming anyone foolish enough to sit with food. Marcus bought a coffee from a cart vendor and found an empty bench, watching the world move around him. That's when he heard it. A voice, young and clear, rising above the morning noise. "It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known." Marcus turned. There, under a barren oak tree, stood the boy from the rainy night. He was reading aloud from a tattered book, performing for a small crowd of early morning parkgoers. His voice transformed the words, breathing life into Dickens' famous ending. Despite his torn jacket and worn jeans, despite the backpack that clearly held all his worldly possessions, he commanded attention like a trained actor. When he finished, scattered applause rippled through the small audience. A few people dropped coins into a cardboard box at his feet. Most walked away. The boy, Elijah, though Marcus didn't know his name yet, carefully collected the change and counted it. His face fell. Not enough for breakfast. Marcus found himself walking over before his mind caught up with his feet. "You're good," Marcus said simply. "Very good." Elijah's head snapped up, and those blue eyes widened with recognition. "You're the guy from the rain." "Yes." Marcus managed a small smile. "I believe you owe me a new suit." For a moment, Elijah looked terrified, ready to run again. But something in Marcus's tone, gentle, almost teasing, made him pause. "I'm sorry about that," Elijah said carefully. "The security guard was chasing me and I wasn't looking where I—" "Why was he chasing you?" Elijah's jaw tightened, that defiant chin tilt appearing again. "Because I exist. Because people like me aren't supposed to be visible in nice neighborhoods." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. How many times had he said similar things? How many people had he dismissed as not belonging in his world? "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Elijah." A pause. "Elijah Carter." "Well, Elijah Carter, have you eaten today?" Suspicion clouded the boy's face. "Why?" "Because I'm hungry, and eating alone is depressing. There's a diner 2 blocks from here. Best pancakes in Manhattan." Marcus pulled out his wallet, saw Elijah tense, and quickly added, "I'm not giving you money. I'm offering you breakfast." "There's a difference." Elijah studied him for a long moment. Every instinct screamed danger. Rich old white men didn't offer street kids meals without wanting something in return. But there was something different about this one. Something sad in his eyes that Elijah recognized. Loneliness. Loss. The kind of grief that doesn't heal, it just learns to hide better. Okay, Elijah said quietly. But I keep my backpack with me. Fair enough. The diner smelled like coffee and maple syrup. Marcus slid into a red vinyl booth, and Elijah sat across from him, backpack clutched on his lap like a shield. Order whatever you want, Marcus said, handing him a menu. Elijah's eyes scanned the prices, calculating. Just coffee is fine. Elijah. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. When was the last time you had a real meal? Yesterday. The truth. Elijah's fingers tightened on the menu. 3 days ago. Marco at Giovanni's gives me leftovers, but the restaurant's been slow. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. This boy, probably not much older than Emily's son would have been, was starving. And here Marcus sat, with more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. The pancakes, Marcus said to the waitress who'd appeared. 2 stacks. Eggs, bacon, hash browns, orange juice. And keep the coffee coming. When the food arrived, Elijah tried to eat slowly, tried to maintain dignity. But hunger won. He devoured the meal like someone who didn't know where the next one would come from, because he didn't. Marcus picked at his own food, watching. The book you were reading. A Tale of Two Cities. That's advanced reading. My mom gave me Dickens when I was 12, Elijah said between bites. Said if I was going to read, I should read the best. We'd take turns reading chapters out loud to each other. She sounds like a wonderful mother. Where is she now? The fork in Elijah's hand stopped moving. His eyes dropped to his plate. Dead. 2 years ago. Gas leak. She and my dad both. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I'm so sorry. Do you have other family? No one who wanted me. Elijah's voice was barely a whisper. I had an aunt, but she said she couldn't handle raising a teenager. Especially. He trailed off. Especially what? Especially a mixed kid with trauma. That's what the social worker wrote in my file. I saw it once. Elijah looked up, and his blue eyes were fierce. But I'm not broken. I'm not a problem. I'm just surviving, Marcus finished softly. You're just trying to survive. Something passed between them in that moment. An understanding, a recognition of shared humanity. Marcus saw past the dirty clothes and homeless status. And Elijah saw past the expensive suit and billionaire reputation. They saw each other as simply human. Simply hurting. Why are you being nice to me? Elijah asked suddenly. People don't just buy street kids breakfast. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Because 15 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I let prejudice and pride destroy my family. I lost my daughter because I couldn't see past my own narrow idea of who belonged in my world. He met Elijah's eyes. I can't fix that mistake. But maybe I can do better now. Starting with breakfast. Elijah didn't know what to say to that. So he just nodded and finished his pancakes, while across from him, a lonely billionaire watched and wondered why those blue eyes felt like a message from a daughter who would never forgive him. What would you do if you discovered someone with incredible talent living in such difficult circumstances? Let me know your thoughts below. I read every comment. The breakfast became a routine. Every Tuesday and Friday morning, Marcus would find Elijah in Washington Square Park, and they'd walk to the diner together. At first, Elijah remained guarded, answering questions with careful brevity. But slowly, like ice melting under spring sun, he began to open up. Marcus learned that Elijah had been an honor student before his parents died, that he'd loved chemistry and dreamed of becoming a pharmacist like his father, that his mother had been a librarian who filled their small Oregon home with books and laughter and unconditional love. She had these eyes, Elijah said one morning, stirring sugar into his coffee. Bright blue, like the sky after rain. People always stared because, brown kid with blue eyes. But she'd tell me it made me special. That I carried the best of both my parents in my face. Marcus's hand trembled slightly as he lifted his own coffee cup. Blue eyes. His mind flashed to Emily, to the day she was born, and the nurses had exclaimed over her unusual eye color. Wellington blue, his wife had called it, a family trait going back generations. Your mother sounds like she was extraordinary, Marcus said carefully. She was. Elijah's voice cracked slightly. She used to say that love was bigger than any box society tried to put people in. That my dad proved that when he married her despite. He stopped abruptly. Despite what? Despite her family hating him for being black. They disowned her. Wouldn't even come to the wedding. Elijah's fingers tightened around his cup. She never talked about them much. Said they chose hate over her, so she chose love over them. Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. The room tilted. He gripped the edge of the table, fighting to keep his expression neutral while his world splintered apart. Elijah, he said slowly. What was your mother's name? Emily. Emily Carter. Well, Emily Johnson before she married my dad. The diner noise faded to white static. Marcus stared at the boy across from him. His grandson, his daughter's son, and saw it all clearly now. The blue eyes. The defiant chin. The love of literature. The fierce independence. All Emily. All his. Are you okay, Mr. Wellington? Elijah asked, concerned. You look really pale. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. How do you tell a boy that you're the grandfather who destroyed his mother's life? That your prejudice and pride had driven Emily away, had cost her everything, including the chance for her son to grow up with family? I'm fine, Marcus lied, his voice hoarse. Just tell me more about your mother. Please. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus learned everything. He learned that Emily had kept her maiden name secret, probably to protect her new family from his reach. He learned that she'd been happy, deeply happy, right up until the end. That she'd built the life she wanted, full of love and simple joys, far from his toxic world of wealth and status. And he learned that Elijah had no idea who his mother's family was. Emily had erased the Wellingtons from her story completely. Marcus began showing up with more than breakfast. A new winter coat, which he claimed was extra from a charity drive. A smartphone with a prepaid plan, so we can stay in touch easier. Books, first editions of Dickens, Steinbeck, Morrison, that he said were just cluttering my office. Why are you doing this? Elijah asked one morning, running his hands over a pristine copy of Beloved. I mean, I'm grateful, but I don't understand. You're a billionaire. You could help 1,000 kids. Why me? Because you're my grandson, Marcus thought. Because your mother was my daughter and I destroyed her life and I can never make that right, but maybe I can protect you the way I should have protected her. Because you remind me of someone I lost, Marcus said instead. And because everyone deserves a chance, Elijah. Especially someone as bright as you. But Marcus's good intentions collided with reality on a cold January morning. He arrived at the park to find Elijah's spot empty. Panic seized him. He searched for an hour before his phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Wellington. Elijah's voice was thick with fear. I'm sorry to call, but I didn't know what else to do. What happened? Where are you? Police station. 15th Precinct. They arrested me last night for trespassing. I was sleeping in the subway and, his voice broke. They're talking about putting me back in the system. Court-ordered placement. They found out I'm 16 and they're calling it child endangerment to let me stay on the streets. Marcus was already moving toward the door, snapping his fingers at his assistant. I'm on my way. Don't say anything else until I get there. At the precinct, Marcus Wellington's name opened doors. Within an hour, he was face to face with a tired social worker named Patricia Chen and a by-the-book sergeant who looked unimpressed by wealth. Mr. Wellington, while we appreciate your interest in the boy's welfare, this is a matter for Child Protective Services, Patricia said firmly. Elijah is a minor with no legal guardian. He needs to be in a safe, supervised environment. He needs to be somewhere stable, Marcus countered. Not shuffled back into a system that's already failed him twice. And what do you propose? The sergeant asked, his tone skeptical. You want to take him home like a stray dog? Marcus's jaw tightened at the crude comparison, but he forced himself to stay calm. I want to help. I have resources. You're a stranger, sir. You've known this boy for what, a month? Patricia's eyes were kind but firm. The court won't just hand over custody to someone with no legal connection. Then what are my options? You could become a licensed foster parent, which takes months of training and home studies. Or you could file for emergency guardianship, but you'd need to prove a substantial prior relationship and demonstrate why you're a better option than state care. She paused. Given that you've only known Elijah for a few weeks, neither option is realistic. In the holding area, visible through a glass window, Elijah sat with his head in his hands. He looked small, defeated, nothing like the defiant boy who'd knocked Marcus down in the rain. How long do I have? Marcus asked quietly. The hearing is in 3 days. After that, he'll be placed in a group home pending more permanent arrangements. Patricia's expression softened. Mr. Wellington, I know you mean well. But this boy needs more than money. He needs a family. Stability. Someone who's committed for the long haul, not just feeling charitable. As Marcus left the station, his mind raced. He could tell them the truth, that Elijah was his grandson. DNA tests would prove it. But then Elijah would know everything. Would know that his grandfather was the man who'd driven Emily away. Would know that Marcus's prejudice had poisoned his mother's life. And what if Elijah hated him for it? What if revealing the truth destroyed the fragile trust they'd built? That evening, Marcus sat in his penthouse office, staring at a photograph he'd kept hidden for 15 years. Emily at age 16, her blue eyes bright with hope, before everything fell apart. His phone buzzed. A text from Elijah's new number. Thank you for trying. I know you did your best. Maybe this is just how my story ends. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. No. He'd failed Emily. He wouldn't fail her son. But saving Elijah meant revealing the truth. And the truth might destroy them both. Marcus Wellington hadn't built an empire by accepting defeat. That night, he made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to his lawyer, Richard Morrison, who'd handled Wellington family matters for 30 years. Richard, I need you to pull every record you can find on Emily Wellington. Marriage certificate, birth records for any children, death certificate, everything. Marcus, Emily passed away 2 years ago. We already. I know when she died. What I need to know is if she had a son. I need proof. The silence on the other end was deafening. My God. The homeless boy. You think he's... I don't think. I know. Those eyes, Richard. They're Emily's eyes. They're Wellington eyes. Marcus's voice cracked. He's my grandson, and I've been buying him breakfast while he sleeps in doorways because I was too much of a coward to see what was right in front of me. The second call was to Dr. Sarah Chen, a geneticist he'd funded research for. I need a DNA test. Discreet, fast, and legally admissible in family court. The third call was the hardest. He dialed the number Elijah had called from earlier. Mr. Wellington. Elijah's voice was heavy with defeat. I need to see you. Tonight. It's important. They're keeping me at a temporary youth shelter until the hearing. I don't think they'll let me. They will. I'm on my way. An hour later, Marcus sat across from Elijah in a sterile meeting room at the youth shelter. A board staff member stood by the door, scrolling through her phone. Elijah, Marcus began, his hands trembling slightly. I need to ask you some questions about your mother. Very specific questions. Okay. Elijah looked confused. Her full maiden name. Do you know it? Johnson, I think. She never really talked about her family. Just said they weren't in our lives anymore. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Elijah a photograph. A professional family portrait from 18 years ago. Marcus, his late wife Catherine, and a teenage Emily with striking blue eyes and a bright smile. Have you ever seen this girl before? Elijah stared at the photo, his brow furrowing. She looks kind of like my mom, but younger. Who is she? That's Emily Wellington. My daughter. She disappeared from my life 15 years ago after I... Marcus's voice broke. He took a breath and forced himself to continue. After I told her that her choice to marry a black man was unacceptable. After I said terrible, unforgivable things. After I chose my prejudice over my only child. The room went silent. Elijah's face had gone pale. What are you saying? I'm saying that I believe your mother was my daughter. That she changed her last name to Johnson to hide from me, to protect you and your father from my toxicity. And I'm saying that those blue eyes you inherited didn't just come from any white mother. They came from the Wellington family. From me. Elijah stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. No. No, that's not. My mom would have told me if... Would she? Would she have told you about the father who disowned her? Who called the man she loved unsuitable? Who valued money and status over his own daughter's happiness? Marcus's eyes were wet now. Emily was protecting you, Elijah. From me. From the poison that destroyed her life. Get out. Elijah's voice was shaking. This is some kind of sick game, and I want you to leave. I can prove it. DNA test. It'll take 48 hours. And if I'm right, when I'm right, I'm going to that hearing and I'm going to fight for you with everything I have. Why? Elijah's voice broke on the word. Why now? Why do you suddenly care about the grandson you never wanted to meet? Marcus stood facing the boy, his grandson, with tears streaming down his face. Because I was wrong. About everything. Because your mother was right when she said love is bigger than prejudice. Because I destroyed her life, but I'll be damned if I let this broken system destroy yours. And because, his voice dropped to a whisper, because you're all I have left of her. And she deserved better than me. But maybe, if you'll let me, I can be better for you. The DNA results came back in 36 hours. 99.9% probability of grandpaternal relationship. Marcus's lawyer worked through the night preparing an emergency petition for guardianship. The family court hearing was set in a small fluorescent-lit room. Patricia Chen, the social worker, presented her case for state placement. Then Marcus Wellington stood up, and the entire room seemed to shift. Your Honor, my name is Marcus Wellington, and I'm here to petition for guardianship of my grandson, Elijah Carter. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s named Judge Maria Rodriguez, raised an eyebrow. Mr. Wellington, according to these files, you had no contact with this child until 6 weeks ago. That's correct, Your Honor. Because I didn't know he existed. Because 15 years ago, I made a choice that I will regret for the rest of my life. Marcus's voice was steady now, certain. I disowned my daughter Emily for marrying a black man. I let my prejudice poison the most important relationship I had. And Emily was so determined to protect her family from my hatred that she erased the Wellington name entirely, changed her identity, made sure that if anything happened to her, her son would never have to face the grandfather who'd rejected his very existence. The courtroom was silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. But fate gave me a second chance I don't deserve. I literally ran into Elijah on a street corner 2 months ago. And I was so blinded by my own lingering prejudice that I didn't see the truth staring at me with my daughter's eyes. I just saw a homeless black kid and nearly walked away. Marcus turned to look at Elijah, who sat rigid in his chair, eyes fixed on the floor. Your Honor, I can't undo the past. I can't bring Emily back or erase the pain I caused. But I can offer Elijah something the state cannot. Family. Not just money or resources, but a home. A legacy. A grandfather who has spent 15 years learning the hard way that love and family mean more than any prejudice or pride. Judge Rodriguez studied the DNA results, then looked at Elijah. Young man, you haven't said a word through this entire proceeding. This decision affects your life. What do you want? Elijah's hands were clenched in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I don't know. He's right. My mom never talked about her family. But she also never talked about hate. She taught me that people can change, that redemption is real, that, his voice cracked, that everyone deserves a second chance. He looked up at Marcus for the first time since entering the courtroom. Did you really love her? My mom. More than anything in the world, Marcus said, tears streaming freely now. And I showed it in the worst possible way, by trying to control her life instead of celebrating it. But she was magnificent, Elijah. Smart and brave and full of love. Everything good I see in you came from her. She kept one photo, Elijah said quietly, hidden in her jewelry box. I found it after she died. A picture of her as a little girl with an older couple. On the back it said Mom, Dad, and me at the beach. I always wondered who they were. If they were still alive. If they ever thought about her. Marcus's breath caught. I thought about her every single day. Every deal I closed, every building I built, I wanted to tell her. Show her. Apologize. But I was too proud and too scared. And now she's gone, and I can never make it right with her. But Elijah, he took a step closer. If you'll let me, I want to try to make it right with you. Not because it absolves me of anything. I'll carry the guilt of what I did to Emily until the day I die. But because you deserve family. You deserve a home. And I'm asking for the chance to be the grandfather I should have been all along. Judge Rodriguez took a long moment before speaking. Mr. Wellington, I'm granting temporary guardianship pending a 6-month review period. During that time, you'll both participate in family counseling. Elijah will be enrolled in school, and social services will conduct monthly home visits. This isn't about your money or your influence. This is about whether you can provide this young man with the stable, loving home he deserves. Do you understand? I do, Your Honor. Thank you. As they left the courthouse, Elijah walked silently beside Marcus. The winter sun was setting, painting the New York sky in shades of orange and gold. I have a room ready for you, Marcus said carefully. At my home. If you want it. We can stop and get your things from the shelter and... I don't have things. Just my backpack. Then we'll get you things. Whatever you need. They reached Marcus's car, where Charles stood waiting by the door. The driver's eyes widened when he saw Elijah, but he said nothing, simply opening the door. Elijah paused before getting in. Why did you really help me? Before you knew who I was. That first breakfast. Why? Marcus met those blue eyes, Emily's eyes, and answered with complete honesty. Because you reminded me of everything I'd lost. And because somewhere deep down I think my heart recognized you before my mind did. Family calls to family, even when we're too blind to see it. Elijah nodded slowly, then climbed into the car. As they drove through Manhattan toward Marcus's penthouse, the boy pressed his face against the window, watching the city lights blur past. Mr. Wellington, you can call me Marcus. Or, he hesitated, or whatever feels right to you. Marcus, then. Can I ask you something? Anything. That first night we met, when I knocked you down in the rain. You looked at me like you'd seen a ghost. Did some part of you know even then? Marcus thought back to that moment, the shock of those blue eyes, the familiar tilt of that defiant chin, the way his heart had stuttered with recognition. I think, he said slowly, that your mother was still looking out for you, even from wherever she is now. I think she sent me exactly where I needed to be at exactly the right moment. And I think she forgave me long before I deserved it, because that's who Emily was. 3 months later, Elijah Carter stood in front of Marcus's study, hesitating before knocking. He'd been living in the penthouse for almost 90 days now. He had his own room, his own space, everything he could possibly need. But it still didn't feel quite like home. Come in, Marcus called. Elijah entered to find his grandfather surrounded by papers. Legal documents, photographs, old letters. What's all this? Your mother's life, Marcus said quietly. Everything I could find. Birth certificate, school records, her college applications. She got into Yale on a full scholarship. Did you know that? She was brilliant. He held up a faded letter. And this. This is the last letter she ever sent me, 3 years after she left. I never opened it. I was too angry, too stubborn. What does it say? Marcus's hands trembled as he unfolded the yellowed paper. It says, "Dad, I had a son. Your grandson. I named him Elijah, which means my God is Yahweh. A reminder that love is bigger than human judgment. He has your eyes. He has your stubborn chin. And he has all the love that you refuse to accept. I hope someday you understand what you gave up. But more than that, I hope someday you find a way to forgive yourself. Because I already have. Love always, Emily." Elijah felt tears burning his eyes. She forgave you. Even after everything. She did. I just wish I'd been brave enough to read it while she was still alive. To tell her I was wrong. To meet you when you were small and still knew how to trust. Marcus looked up. Elijah, I know these past few months have been strange. I know I'm not perfect, and I'm still learning how to be a grandfather. But I want you to know. I want to change my name, Elijah interrupted. Marcus froze. What? Not my first name. That's from my parents. I'm keeping that. But my last name. Carter was my dad's name, and I'm proud of that. But Wellington is my mom's name. Her real name. The name she had to hide because of hate. And I think, Elijah's voice strengthened, I think it's time that name stood for something different. For second chances. For a black kid with blue eyes who survived homelessness and found his family. For love winning over prejudice. Marcus stood, crossed the room, and pulled his grandson into a tight embrace. Elijah Carter Wellington. It's perfect. You're perfect. And your mother. God, Emily would be so proud of who you've become. They held each other in that book-lined study. 2 generations bridging a gap that should never have existed. Healing wounds that had festered for 15 years. 6 months later, on a warm June morning, Marcus and Elijah stood together in Washington Square Park, right where they'd first shared breakfast. But this time they weren't alone. Elijah had started a program called Second Glances, a mentorship initiative pairing homeless youth with professional tutors and advocates. He'd recruited 15 volunteers so far, and they were helping 23 kids get off the streets and back into school. Your mother would love this, Marcus said, watching Elijah coordinate with volunteers. She always believed in the power of education to change lives. She also believed in second chances, Elijah replied. For everyone. Even stubborn grandfathers who took 15 years to learn they were wrong. Marcus smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in years. Especially stubborn grandfathers. As they watched homeless teenagers arrive for tutoring sessions, receiving hot meals and backpacks full of supplies, Marcus thought about the rainy night when he'd literally collided with his future. How close he'd come to walking away. How prejudice had nearly blinded him to the greatest gift he'd ever receive. You know what the crazy thing is? Elijah said, echoing his grandfather's thoughts. You walked past me a dozen times that first month. Before we actually met. I'd see you going into your building and I'd think, that guy probably thinks I'm invisible. But I wasn't invisible. You just weren't ready to see me yet. And now I can't imagine not seeing you. Not knowing you. Marcus put his arm around Elijah's shoulders. You saved me, you know. Just as much as I saved you. We saved each other, Elijah corrected. That's what family does. As the sun climbed higher over Manhattan, grandfather and grandson stood together in the park where their story had begun. Proof that love, real transformative love, is always stronger than the walls we build to keep it out. This story shows how one act of kindness can change everything. What's one way you could make a difference in someone's life today? Challenge yourself and share your commitment in the comments. 2 years have passed since that fateful rainy night when Marcus Wellington collided with his grandson on a Manhattan sidewalk. Today, the Wellington Foundation's Second Glances initiative has expanded to 12 cities across America, helping over 500 homeless youth find stable housing, education, and mentorship. Elijah Carter Wellington, now 18, graduated at the top of his class from one of New York's most prestigious prep schools. He's been accepted to Yale University, the same school his mother earned a full scholarship to decades ago, where he plans to study social work and public policy. but he's deferred his admission for 1 year to work full-time expanding second glances. My mom always said that education was the key to freedom, Elijah shared in a recent interview. But I learned that family, real family, the kind that shows up and stays, is what gives you the courage to use that key. Marcus Wellington, now 63, has stepped back from the day-to-day operations of his real estate empire to focus on philanthropic work. He and Elijah co-chair the foundation together, splitting their time between board meetings and street outreach. Every Tuesday and Friday morning, you can still find them in that same diner, sharing breakfast, but now they're often joined by youth from their program. The Wellington penthouse has been transformed. What was once a sterile showpiece of wealth is now a home filled with laughter, books, and photographs. The walls display pictures of Emily at every age, honoring the daughter Marcus lost and the mother who shaped Elijah's heart. In the place of pride hangs Emily's final letter, framed and preserved, a reminder that forgiveness and love can transcend even the deepest wounds. Marcus has also begun the difficult work of examining his own prejudices and privilege. He regularly speaks at schools and community centers about his journey from bigotry to understanding, never shying away from the harm he caused. I can't undo the past, he tells audiences. I can't bring Emily back or give Elijah the childhood he deserved. But I can commit every day to being better, to seeing people, really seeing them, regardless of what boxes society tries to put them in. The most profound change, however, is personal. For the first time in decades, Marcus Wellington knows what it means to be loved not for his wealth or power, but simply for showing up, for trying, for being imperfectly, honestly human. And Elijah has learned that family isn't just about blood or shared DNA. It's about people who choose you every single day, who fight for you when the world tries to make you invisible, who prove through their actions that you matter. This story began with a collision on a rainy street, a moment that could have been dismissed as just another anonymous encounter in a crowded city. But it became something extraordinary because one man chose to look beyond his prejudices, and one young man chose to give second chances. How many potential connections do we miss because we don't truly see the people around us? How many lives could be changed if we simply paid attention to those society has rendered invisible? Marcus Wellington spent 15 years blind to his own bigotry, and it cost him his daughter. But when fate gave him a second chance, he had to make a choice. Hold on to pride and prejudice, or embrace the uncomfortable work of change and redemption. He chose love. He chose family. And in doing so, he discovered that the greatest wealth isn't measured in properties or profit margins. It's measured in relationships restored, in second chances given, in the courage to admit when we're wrong and the commitment to do better. Elijah's story reminds us that homeless doesn't mean hopeless. That a young person sleeping in doorways might be brilliant, talented, and worthy of every opportunity we take for granted. That circumstances don't define potential, and that with the right support, anyone can not just survive but thrive. But more than that, this story proves that it's never too late. Never too late to change. Never too late to make amends. Never too late to become the person you should have been all along. The question is, what will you do with your second chances? Stories like this remind us that extraordinary kindness exists all around us, waiting for us to simply open our eyes and see it. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover these inspiring tales of human connection and redemption. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Stories about second chances, unlikely connections, and the transformative power of choosing love over prejudice. But most importantly, I challenge you to do something this week. Look at the people you pass on the street. Really see them. Buy a meal for someone who's hungry. Start a conversation with someone society has rendered invisible. Be someone's Marcus Wellington, not because you'll discover you're related, but because every human being deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be given a chance. What act of kindness will you perform this week? Who will you choose to really see? Share your commitment in the comments below. Let's inspire each other to be the change we want to see in the world. Remember, you have the power to change someone's entire world. And sometimes, in helping others find their way home, you discover that you've been lost too. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being the kind of person who believes that love, redemption, and second chances are always possible. Now go out there and prove it.